So then we should have completed our little activity, just our thoughts on what those things mean, and we'll go back to that. And you should have watched that video. Let's quickly reflect on some of the points the speaker wanted to bring out in that video. I thought it was really interesting, some of the points he made. And one of them he mentioned, which is really relevant to us doing this course, is that if we want to be more self-aware, we need to make sure we're not reluctant learners. So to do that, we've got to be open-minded. We've got to listen to what we hear in this course. If we're thinking some of these things as we go through it, oh, this is not for me, or I've heard all that before, then remember what the speaker just said. One of the most dangerous times is when we say we think we know it all, because then we're not going to be open-minded. We're just going to close our thoughts, think, oh, I know that, and move on. So take everything on board. Look at it, see if it fits into your situation, and don't be that reluctant learner. He also mentioned that we need to be aware of our unconscious bias. We'll discuss that particular term in a little bit more detail, but he said that our assumptions and our perceptions could be really dangerous because our brains are so quick. He talked about something that we talk about in conflict management, which is the amygdala in the center of the brain. And that's the thing that gives us our fight or flight response. We get a stimulus and there is a natural or instant response. It's only afterwards that we have that conscious thought and reasoning about why we might have done it. He talked about the lion tamer and everyone being scared and thinking everyone would be scared, but that person probably wasn't because they were a lion tamer. We base our perceptions on our feelings or our values, and that's not always true because different people have different values and different perceptions. So that's something we need to be aware of as well. He also talked about understanding our emotions, and he talked about 4 basic emotions, and then he said there was 2 extra, surprise and disgust, that sort of could be added. But these are not conscious thoughts. They happen, and they're very subjective depending on our previous experiences, our individual perceptions, dependent on our skills. He talked about recognizing the triggers, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail later. But he gave that example of getting angry at an email, and although I thought it was very simplistic, it's a very good point to make out that we need to take time to consider our emotions. We can all recognize that anger, but it's what actions we take afterwards that make the difference. He went on to mention domains as well, self-assessment, self-regulation, etc. They're based on Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence work theory, and we'll look at that in more detail, as we will some other theories on emotional intelligence. And as I said, we'll look at some more emotional intelligence, but he said there were 3 secrets to that emotional intelligence. It's about knowing your triggers, learning to recognize them, and then having ways of coping with them so that you, for example, when you get annoyed with someone, you recognize and change a perspective and think, well, why am I getting annoyed with them? What is it that's causing me to be annoyed? And what part am I playing? Because you're probably causing some behaviors in that person which is proving to be the annoyance. He also thought he said something I thought was very good when he simplified what emotional intelligence was, and we're going to look at some theories later on, but he said it was the ability to use our own emotional knowledge of self and others to inform our choices. All very interesting. Hope you agree and keep an open mind. He did near the end say that finalizing that self-awareness is the foundation for emotional intelligence. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail when we get into emotional intelligence. So very interesting points in that video. Hopefully you've made lots of notes. You can use those in your end of unit assessment, and also start using them now to help start thinking about yourself, how you react, how you appear to others, and the impact that might be having. So let's consider 3 areas that's really going to be having an impact, or could have an impact. The first is relationships. Building relationships and building rapport shows people that you're trying. So even if you're not achieving it, you're attempting it, and therefore has an impact, and they'll try. To do this effectively, you need to know about yourself and how you come across, so that you know what people are seeing when they're dealing with you, and how you're having an impact on them. The second area is the leadership style. We're going to talk more about leadership styles in the leading people unit, But the style you choose will be based on your traits, behaviours and skills, so you need to know about yourselves and about the individuals and tasks and situations that your team are in, so you need to have built relationships with them so that you know about those things so you can choose the correct leadership style. And then finally, communication. Bad communication not only achieves less, it's less effective, it's very inefficient. It's an excellent way of fomenting arguments, divisions, and power struggles, which people will use to break down relationships, etc. So we need to be aware of how other people see our communication, how we come across, because that's all part of communication. And I've always used an adage of judge your communication by the response that you get. And I suppose that's part of that emotional intelligence thing. So becoming self-aware is key to advancing your career. It's key to, well, in relationships and private life as well. It helps you pinpoint your passions, your emotions, helps you find out about your personality, and that can help you in lots of ways. You learn to recognize your thoughts, your emotions, where it's leading you, what changes you could make to improve things. And once you're aware, you can make those adjustments. It's not a case of doing it all the time. It's just a case of being aware so that you've got a chance to make those differences. So in the next slide, we'll just have a look at the activity I want you to do now. Right then, so I want to focus on this activity. I want to focus on a couple of areas. There's the 4 emotions we talked about, and then he talked about 3 secrets of emotional intelligence. I want you to think about the emotional triggers you have in respect of being a leader. So identify the triggers that relate to each emotion. So for anger, what is it that makes you angry, and what is it that causes that anger? And then I want you to come up with ways that you can cope with those triggers. So for each emotion, I want you to try and come up with 5 things that sets that off. And then for part 2, think about some ways of coping. So try and come up with sort of 10 things across all those triggers. So Word document there, download it, fill it in, upload it back up, and then we'll come back after you've completed that activity.